Hello, welcome back to the channel, it's Dan. You've probably seen in the last video that we've got a bit of a change of setup at the moment and Matt is not going to be in the videos for a little bit. He's had a new change of job basically, but he will be back soon hopefully, and we'll be back to having the posters and everything. But for now, he just stuck with a solo review of me and my kitchen. So yeah, that's what's going on with that. So let's talk about The Irishman. So The Irishman is the new Scorsese movie. It stars De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, Jesse Plemons, Ray Romano, Stephen Graham, who's great. There's just loads of great people, really good cast. But I guess the big talking point is the runtime, because it's 3.5 hours, and I can see why a lot of people would be put off by that. I booked, there was a couple of days where I was going to go see it, and then I was like, I'm just not in the mood to see a 3.5 hour film, and eventually I went and saw it, and I've got to say, it doesn't feel 3.5 hours. Yes, it feels long, but I don't know, I've always found Scorsese's movies to be really well paced. Like The Wolf of Wall Street, that's 3 hours, and to me it feels like 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Like, you know, they just fly by, and that is in big part thanks to Scorsese's editor, Thelma Schumacher, who had a hell of a job with this movie, because not only was there like a ridiculous amount of scenes to film, I think there was like 300 scenes in this film, which like your average film would have between 40 and 60 scenes, so like that's the amount of footage that she had to work with. But not only that, she had like a bunch of different time periods to kind of flip back and forth between and keep the movie like framed well and paced well and kind of, you know, keep it even throughout. And I've got to say, she does a phenomenal job. I would imagine she'll be nominated for an Academy Award. I think she's won it twice before, maybe 3 times. She's got to be nominated for this. The editing in this movie is ridiculous. But pretty much everything in this movie is ridiculous. The performances are great. I mean, Robert De Niro, we know he's one of the greatest actors alive, but he's not really brought it that often lately. But in this film, he does. He gives his best performance in a long time. And he's very subtle. Like, he plays a very stoic character who he never really reveals how he's feeling, doesn't really give much away, but you can always tell just in the way that he carries himself. And there's a couple of scenes in particular where he's sad about something, and he just gives this, but he's not allowed to show that he's sad because he's in the presence of like mafia bosses and stuff, but you can just see this little glint in his eye. You can tell he's sad, but it's just such a subtle performance, and that's really good. Al Pacino he gives a much more energetic performance than Robert De Niro, as you probably expect, but again, really captivating every time he's on screen. Joe Pesci really reins it in for this. He plays a really cold, calculated kind of guy, and he's just as intimidating as he is when he's screaming and shouting. Stephen Graham, for me, was a big standout. He doesn't have the biggest part, but whenever he's on screen, I don't know, I just really dug his character. I thought he brought like a good energy. He was kind of not the antagonist, but he was kind of an antagonist for a bit, to Jimmy Hoffa, Al Pacino's character. And I just loved whenever he was on screen. The score was really good as well. This is a film, it's a spoiler-free video, so I'm not going to get too deep into the film, but the film does kind of explore certain themes like morality, mortality, legacy, things like that, quite deep themes. And, you know, you can tell it's made by an older man. I mean, Scorsese, I think he's like in his mid-70s now, late 70s, and you can kind of tell that because there's definitely some things in there where, you know, some deep themes that he hasn't touched on before, some mature themes, and the score really helps hammer them home. It's just got this really sad, kind of slow vibe to it, and it just feels really kind of haunting and poignant and sad. But those themes that I was talking about, that's another thing in the movie. Don't go into this expecting Goodfellas or The Wolf of Wall Street or something really high octane, because this is not that movie. This is a slow film, and it's kind of like a Scorsese movie, but like from the backseat of the car, you know? Like, it's much more, you spend a lot more time with these characters, just kind of reflecting on things they've done or things they're going to do. It's got some good entertaining sequences in there for sure, but yeah, it's very much like a meditative piece, and there's a lot of self-reflexivity going on. So yeah, just bear that in mind when you go in. This is not like a super high-octane Goodfellas or anything like that. The cinematography is brilliant in this film as well. I mean, it's a staple of Scorsese's work at this point. I think that's partially why his films like flow so well and feel so well paced, because the camera movement is just so fluid. It's always tracking, it's always moving. It's never just like point and shoot, or it's never never just a static shot unless it's a static shot for a specific reason. You know, it's always pushing in on someone or spinning around or, you know, like I say, following someone down a corridor. It's always some really interesting camera movement that just helps put you in that place and just adds like a real energy to the movie. The de-aging tech as well, another big thing about this. That was my biggest issue going into the film. That was what I was most worried about. I think it took the budget up to like 175 million with all the de-aging tech. And there's been films before where they've used de-aging tech, obviously, but this has to use it in a variety of different ways because this film spans decades. So there's like different levels to it, and I was really apprehensive about that going in. I've got to say, they do a pretty good job of it. Now, I don't have the best eye for CGI anyway. Like, I'm one of those people who can like not really notice bad CGI unless it's terrible. But compared to I still think Samuel L. Jackson in Captain Marvel is probably the best I've seen. But after that, I'd say it's probably this. You notice it a little bit at first, and I've heard other people say that the face doesn't always match the body language because you've got like a 75-year-old guy playing. You know, he's got like a 40-year-old face, but he's got the posture and he walks like a 75-year-old man. So that could be jarring a little bit, but they tend to kind of work their way around that by not having too many scenes that involve, you know, an old Robert De Niro walking around with a young Robert De Niro face on. So, yeah, it might be a bit jarring for a few minutes, but I can almost guarantee you will completely forget about it. I did. I was able to completely fall into the movie. And yeah, that's good. Unlike a lot of other Scorsese's films, the violence is depicted very differently in this one. It's not glorified as such. It's much more realistic feeling, and that means that when it happens, you just feel the impact of it more, and it's kind of more shocking, and you're like, oh shit. Which does bring me to one of my flaws. It's a nitpick, but there's a scene quite early on where Robert De Niro is kicking someone in the street, and I was just very aware that the kicks weren't real kicks. Like, I don't know if the camera angle was just slightly off or if it was to do with De Niro's physical performance, but I could just tell that the kicks weren't landing, you know, and that they were like adding the sound effects in and hiding it with camera angles. I don't know, I could just really tell in that one scene for some reason. But that's more of a nitpick really, and in a 3.5-hour movie, that is a small issue to have. I guess my biggest issue with the film is in real life, we don't know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, right? He disappeared. No one really knows what happened. In this film, you are kind of given a concrete answer. Now, the film is told through the eyes of Robert De Niro, and it's him recalling his version of events. So, by nature of it being through his eyes, it's not a concrete answer because it's just one person's story, but it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of given to you in a way, in a very matter-of-fact way, and I would have liked a bit more ambiguity there, a bit more mystery, a bit more like a multiple choice thing, or, you know, if there were more hints that maybe the narrator, or Robert De Niro, was not a reliable source of information, that would have added something, but it's just kind of given to you, and it is quite an anticlimactic moment as well. I mean, it takes 3 hours to build up to, maybe longer, maybe like 3 hours 10 to build up to the climax of this movie, and it's not as climactic as it could be, and I do kind of see why, because like I said, this movie isn't really made like a movie, it's kind of made like real life, and it's meant to be slower and more realistic, so I get that. That's not too much of an issue in itself, but I would have liked some more ambiguity there, really. One last thing to talk about with this is whether you see it in a cinema or whether you see it on Netflix. Now, I think it comes out on Netflix in the UK on the 27th of November. It might already be out on Netflix in the US, I'm not sure. It is out in some cinemas. To be honest, I would love to sit here and tell you to support this film and to go see it in a cinema, but I can't, because I have to compare it to Roma last year. I saw Roma in the cinema last year, and the sound design and the cinematography kind of demanded that film be watched on the big screen. With The Irishman, it's not the case. And not only that, but the runtime. You know, some people might not want to watch this in one viewing. This might be a 2-viewing thing for some people, or a 3-viewing thing. And, you know, I completely get that. The cinematography is nice to look at, but it's not, like, hugely cinematic. And the sound design, it's fine. It does its job, but it's not like a standout kind of component of the film. So I've got to say, if you're debating whether this is like something you have to see on the big screen, my 2 cents is that you don't have to see it on the big screen. I do hate to say that because I like to advocate kind of supporting non-blockbuster films and stuff like that, but I'm just going to be real with you. If you're tight on money or you don't think you can sit through a 3.5-hour film in one go, just wait till it's on Netflix. Anyway, that's my review of The Irishman. All in all, I think it's one of the best films I've seen this year. I think it's a very good film. Scorsese's still got it. De Niro, Pacino, Pesci have still got it. Film with Schumacher still got it. Really good film. If you liked Scorsese's other films or De Niro's other films or mob films, you will like this. But like I say, keep your expectations in check. It's not a high octane thrill ride for 3.5 hours. It is slower than that. But yeah, so thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to get notified when we upload. I'll probably be uploading more often than we have been lately because usually I have to wait for Matt to come up and then we will film a bunch of reviews in one go. But now that I don't have to do that, I'll probably be reviewing a film every couple of days. So yeah, I'll probably have like 3 videos up a week or something like that. And yeah, tell your friends, subscribe, like the video, do all that shit. Thanks for watching this, and I'll see you in the next video.